Hello, Fox Business and General King. There are Marines in our people with the National Guard, in our Air Force people, in our Navy people. Collusion slash at corners of streets with identity thefts, frauds, and slanders. Also with CBS's WFSB. They put me in fake conversations with themselves and with others as mixed natures of organized crimes and collusions with a whole bunch of names they brought up. And when I caught them forcing a principal child abuser, there's a Leahy family that also faked conversations with me and with others. And in those fake conversations, they pretend I said that everyone's evil. There's a whole bunch of people tied to a Leahy family and people named Lombardo that affected confessions. I never even saw them on my street. They affected confessions to me from people on my street about their roles planting federal evidence as crimes on my street and at the campuses I went behind my back, and with other countries and overt criminal enterprises and private ones at the same time. A bunch of families from Harper Courts and the Britain Superior Court and the Connecticut's District Court, they have collusions with the same families with conjunctions to the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices, and conjunctions to that and the difference of that, where it is brought up, where instances are brought up, formally and informally. In other words, all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the court's names and interbranch names and their sources, and intelligence tied to them, foreign and domestic, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, even when they're not involved with those cases. There's a breaching method that juxtaposed collusions with itself, with its method originally and still. This is why and how it's even gotten away with people pretend they're honest when they debate people. If they say things like, our founders communicated why and how they did not have free speech. They had this declassified for themselves. See, but we have our founders too. We were directed by our founders, plural, to understand that and how and why. The only name of themselves that they could declassify was James Madison, which is critical to understand why and how. Even once he was a principal, then he was a president / chief as well. He still didn't have free speech. Someone must teach. This is known. See, but the names of the people of the sciences were abused since they were kids. Who came through the names of the people of the sciences from off those locations already having been collusion /s as the /s part, as the plural hyper additional parts, and or as the nature, with the difference of that or worse, or the collusions off campuses that are tied to also a hyper foreign breaching method as a scientific value. We could observe it being and having been replaced with hyper intelligence programming too. Black people's peer. So in other words, former director of the F.B.I, Robert Luskin, has roles with Marines, also with digital crimes, and Navy people, foreign and domestic Navy, involved with border countries and whiting forensics. Since I was a kid, whiting forensics is increasingly involved with foreign and domestic countries, with state police families, interstates, and retired police chiefs with the same house /s, involved with Wethersfield Police that faked conversations of me being there at the police station when I was a kid. And now as an adult, I went there and had one word of conversation with one officer. One of the Mendez brothers is involved with falsified police reports and collusions with a Phil Cololo, also per the confessions of a Bob Chase and others at Whiting Forensics, involved with sexual and medical offenders on my street, and roles with different natures of investigators, collusion /s with those same natures and methods of organized crimes, including the family and intimate ties of Hartford Hospital. Of Hartford and Hartford Hospital, the Hartford Superior Court. They have roles with the campuses, including Hartford Hospital. Increasingly, people with Park Street, Alina Pizza on Park Street, involved with Daryl Sullivan, has roles with sequence shifts and name switching with sexual and medical offenders of kids, per more people tied to them. And I don't even know them. They try to make it look like I know them. They by sequence shifting, switching names with a Maggie, pretending it was another Maggie, who's involved with people on all sides of Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, and added, involved with a bunch of people with the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices and corrections offices, criminally forward influence, tactically delusions raw, including with Sandy Hook has a prison there, and other campuses are involved with the same names, and one's tied to them. So please, and then they're pretending it's between neighbors problems, and they're planting these fake problems. They're also planting sequence shifts with their roles about motivations. I'm trying to keep things private for a Keene family. A bunch of people recorded tied to their neighbors too. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed them involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders against me. I can't get them onto paper. They're into branch forging and switching names with them, as their collusions with the names at the court next to the World Trade Center and spots next to the World Trade Center. Weathersfield police confessed the name Scalora, involved with them with sequence shifts, falsified police reports, identity thefts, frauds, slanders. Let's get them. They're also involved with, I never saw them on my street either. A bunch of people that said their cousins are involved with years apart, home break-ins in the area, and roles with the FBI directors, co-defendants, and their family members with sexual and medical offenders of kids, identity theft, fraud, slanders. I don't know. I never had a word of conversation with Nicole Jett. Boyfriends of hers, apparently, or just, in other words, have been roles like Mike Pandolf, Eric Jensen, Ray Clough, Joe DeMoro. They've been planting evidences with judges and prosecutors, people with the state judicial branch office and corrections offices, and also with their educators, acting tied to predicate acts with facts, fake things, and databases. Also influence from up to pretend that we're saying bad things about our teachers, etc. Increasingly, Mr. Neville has collusion /S all along Route 3 in conjunctions to it and to that, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, per his students, and as ones involved with the FBI involved with this, and where they have and how they use the right to lie where they don't have the right to lie. And they're leaving out exceptions in exception nature because they've been faking exceptions exception nature. They've been using the databases at the Britain Superior Court in the Britain, Connecticut as collusion /S with many, many people from other areas on my street involved. A Subby Bajerio, I only know him. He sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. He has federal evidence of his crimes with a bunch of people with all sides of the, and at the state. I never saw him I never saw him the inside of a school. Subby Bajerio. Subby Bajerio, he planted evidences, fake ties to me, fake exceptions of knowing me where he was when he was doing federal evidences crimes, and with other countries, with judges and prosecutors and overt criminal enterprises, private ones, on the sides of the high school, real quick, 2 times. He recorded, also brought money into it. He's involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with a Judge Smith and other judges involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids through other natures of organized crimes per their motivations. There are women judges involved with sexual and medical offenders, leaders of kids forced at first years apart, increasingly with people next to Fox Connecticut News and Hartford, Connecticut. The difference of guilt there or next to the places. And they're guilty because they won't even communicate with me. And they just stealing my identity with WFSB, all their sources, whole bunch of natures of organized crimes at the same time. They have a person involved with the name Robert Rodriguez, and he worked at a place called On the Border. He's involved with people with Mexico and Canada and the border states that have long been connected families at collusions next to with differences, racketeering, worse than war crimes, and acting to cover up lie progressions tied to predicate acts with facts with names next to each of the campuses I went to. Joe DeMoro has cousins named Scalora per him. Even that was made up. There are people where they brought up the name Scalora when they were recorded involved with predicate acts with facts method /S I recorded, minding my own business. These are people that sought me out to dishonestly make confessions. as criminally forward influenced federal predicate acts with facts, methods / S roles. In other words, and with their educators that are increasingly putting fake things in databases behind people's backs and stacking fake things in databases, including interbranch. The Britain Superior Court in the Britain, Connecticut has a bunch of roles with people all involved with home break-ins and other natures of federal crimes and child abuses in my area. With intelligence families, they put fake just because people live next to people, the people I never even had a word of conversation with. Other ones that pretend like a Perone family and their neighbors. Increasingly collusion, repeating fake things about me. And with former mayors, increasingly involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. And intermilitary, Paul Kelly and a bunch of other people with the Air Force and other pilots and their campuses, people that train people to become pilots, are involved all along Route 175 from the founding locations in Old Wethersfield. Involved with private school kids, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with kids from public schools that don't that they're acting tied to, they have classes with people, ones that aren't even in the same grade, never hung around. They're trying to make fake exceptions too, and real exceptions. They're using criminally forward influence. That's why they can't get on paper, and they're switching and forging names into branch. A bunch of people with Yukon ties are also involved with drugs and medicines crimes, with the houses with wire crimes and falsified police reports and conversations and ties to little kids and adults that Wethersfield police have. Intercities collusion with other police departments, retired police chiefs from Wethersfield, but these same ones involved with like people with the name O'Brien, a whole bunch of people with the buildings next to the state capitol and people at the state capitol involved with all kinds of ways that investigators and their campuses never stop being used criminally forward influence, tactically, delusions, raw, as styles, needs, and natures of logic that can't defend that, pretend they have integrity with their uses of their own differences, any nature of difference. See, we have black people's whites of eyes differently from how birds have eyes. We are a different species body of individual bodies than the other species bodies of individual bodies. We have an individual identity of value progression that is generated, not just our species body, but other species bodies. Per science, there's a need to discern this distinct identity of value / value progression that is also non-distinct from ourselves, is distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous / hyper simultaneous, because there's also that part, which is neither us nor them, while it is all things anyway. Many pray. So please, Wethersfield police have roles with Mendez people, police named Mendez and their educators. I never had a class with them. They walked by me, someone told them me their name, and someone told them my name. We don't even know each other. I know that the Morrow family is involved with the people with the World Trade Center in New York City. There's a Fred Grisette, increasingly involved with agencies, foreign and domestic, overt and sexual medical offenders of kids' families, involved next to and with intelligence families that live near me. He sought me out alone to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm this, and they hid this from my parents. He didn't even go to my schools. Increasingly, I found out he has collusions with intelligence people associated with Mayano families and other families of houses and businesses next to Harvard Hospital that are involved with names next to campuses, intercities. And they've been acting and planting together. Even WTNH has people with the name O'Neill and with the intelligence community and with whiting forensics involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids. And this is an educator, one of them, with West Hartford campuses also involved. But then her kids are in Wethersfield campuses. And she has wire crimes and digital crimes of whiting forensics, medical and sexual offenders of kids. They're using their own kids. They have a whole bunch of different countries at Hartford Hospital, putting fake transcripts in their databases. They have the family members of judges, of probate court judges associated with Hartford Hospital, New Britain's hospitals. In other words, intercities, campuses of all ages and natures, including hospitals and fire campuses. A bunch of fire department families. They run into high life progressions for how manifest it was and is how the unmarked intelligence families mixed with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, that they're implying is about and demonstrating, even if they're real, they have collusion slash S with how foreign and domestic have been using words like crimes together, while they have been roles together with the breaching method, with its predicate acts with facts method, singular, as methods plural themselves, all natures of difference, including interbranch switching and forging names. So please, Fox Business, Intercities predicate acts, they have predicate acts method slash S recorded every year since the World Trade Center attack, before it and in the context, with names at the location and the difference of guilt there, or the guilt at the spots next to it, including a court, the court itself from inside the Ninth Circuit Court right before the World Trade Center attack. It was proven afterwards, but right before the World Trade Center attack, or sometime before it, someone had changed, brought into the court legal papers and timestamp. They changed the timestamping to make it appear late to the court, the Ninth Circuit panel of judges, and names on all sides of that case were our forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to roles with predicate acts against, that they would tell you, including people that are deceased. The intelligence has been changing and faking what's actually been proven in cases, and they're planting evidences to cover up on a mass scale. It's recorded how all natures of investigators, their family members, the natures of conjunctions to themselves were used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw. Forgiveness is because you guys, as relative to the child abuses you guys suffered, having had replaced what James Madison and our founders, plural, had declassified for themselves, and about how and why they did not have free speech. See, this appears to be debatable, and people appear to legitimately get away with debating such by using their knowledge of good and evil to take a, which is, for example, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Old Testament, which per signs, before that part of the Genesis, there's a part in it that says only defend right here, where the names of the people, the sciences will come together in the part that comes before it. I never even heard anyone speak about that part, even though it says only defend right here. See, they want to have fights about things, debates about things, valuing sequence shifts, collusion slash S, that were only allowed to be at locations, areas, and states. And for the breaching methods, uses of different slash S, as systems individually grouped and together, all humanity voicings through an as systems tactical ulterior from nature, how nature shows us human species body of individual bodies and group differences generated by its system. Otherwise, it shows us when we are not following its system. It demonstrates with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, as the breaching method knew it would, and designed it to because it knew that also nature would be demonstrating to us increasingly a human fact treatment nature breaching method is manifest at countries A through Z. It is locations, areas, and states, styles, needs, and natures as the names of the people of sciences, and or as the people countering that. In other words, or the difference of it, because there's a trinity manifest, inseparable from every finite detail, distinctly from how, but also non-distinctly from how. It is the order of what is active or grouped, distinctly from how. It is the order of what is simultaneous, or in other words, or altogether. It is a further identity of hypersimultaneous nature. We could use science to discern this. as the ancients had. But see, entertain criminal insidious natures of fact, treatment nature, quality aspects of nature, not just criminally foreign influence, but hyper-criminally foreign influence. A breaching method since before modern religious messengers were born. It only allowed it did not allow anyone free speech more and more because it made them have to counter what a breaching method caused. Fact, treatment nature wise, they had to counter it, therefore physically. And they didn't know how to counter it properly because they didn't understand it. So they blamed other things, others themselves wrongly. And then they defended that. That's why and how these countries are hurting each other regarding the overt criminal enterprises and private ones as collusion with /S with them. How could we be collusion when we hate them? In other words, there have been all kinds of natures of private criminal enterprises and delusions relative with psychiatry. A bunch of people with the name Oliveri. Oliveri sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. He has collusion /S planting evidences with intelligence families near me. And with his roles with the FBI and with the witness protection program too, and all, with the corner of Griswold Street and Fair Lane Drive. Increasingly, people pretending passions and emotions, using real instances to cover up what came first and what's actually recorded. As collusions with World Trade Center predicate acts with the news too. Don't forget that Channel 3 News attached me to fake conversations with them about the World Trade Center attack and about other things, while and how they were forcing a principal child abuser then too, and now, and roles with untimely deaths and murders that were brought up at the same time intercities. The breaching method used confessions before the church was even founded, before the time of Jesus Christ. And then the modern religious messengers were born. Already, there was no free speech, and everyone had to pretend other to an extent, otherwise that body would be censed. And worse than just tortured, extorted further, and enslaved further. Fact, treatment nature-wise, therefore physically. Even our founders did not have free speech. They were fact, treatment nature enslaved. And again, the only founder we know the name of was James Madison. And the reason that's important is because that's how they get away. They're using the knowledge of good and evil. Oh, what year was the World Wars? In other words, the World Wars were caused by what caused the Civil War, besides our founders and James Madison's plan. James Madison's plan caused the Constitutional Convention. James Madison's plan caused the Declaration of Independence. It was a plan that counter-extorted everyone, forced them to break the internationally monitored conversations and rules of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and insidiousness of A through Z, styles, needs, natures of logic, syntax, names, uses, instances, treatment, all as collusion /S, to keep the past active and to come. Styles, needs, and natures incapable of affording humanity's voice by that which is generating the simultaneous distinctly from the individual finite, distinctly from grouped or active, while non-distinctly. So we can discern its three identities of relationship to itself, juxtaposed with matter, where and how won't juxtapose with matter, and where and how part will. And is, where and how we are an active identity of volume. That is an identity of forever nature as its own. This is how pantheism was designed to teach with English and with other ancient languages, being led by the hyper-invisible but still discernible. Therefore, the republic for which we stand, the Campus Martius system, it worked too with exceptions and exception nature to be and to stay being led by that identity of hyper-invisible but still discernible, which is not anything It's not our species body, it's not those species bodies, but it's all things anyway. In other words, and that's how part of how it is functional. We can observe how it is functional, being a real identity of value progression system. We could sense when we are using ones other than. As we know, we have black people's whites of eyes. We have all the syntax regarding how the breaching method reassigned what nature communicates with black people's whites of eyes and the revelations that come with this. Note how it is showing us that birds have two eyes. It is showing us. And we have been systems with short words, therefore their protraction. In other words, even the short words forbid convictions proper by that which is true always. And where and how that is true, and roles with that styles, needs, nature, styles shown by the breaching method. How do we get away with pretending that and pretending integrity with use/s of every nature of difference, including the branches of government, their names, the differences of their titles? This breaching method already assigned them to collusion/s, specifically, for example, to have them speak about crimes anyway. Many pray, boxing. So please, Weathersfield police have roles with the intermilitary and interpolice forums in their campuses. A bunch of people with New Britain's Central Connecticut State University, and further with the campuses in New Britain, intercities, Weathersfield campuses, Rock Hill campuses, Hartford campuses, and names next to them. They have rules with identity thefts, frauds, and slanders 3 ways manifest against each person, including every leader. This is against individual. Only an individual could defend the order of the finite properly. Exceptions in exception nature. Even leaders, in other words, they're forced to entertain subjects and approaches to them where subjects are about the invisible but still discernible. They are part of the parts of speech of English. Again, the parts of speech of English are about the invisible but still discernible, and about the / hyper-invisible. The invisible but still discernible / hyper-invisible but still discernible. The / is a distinct identity part of itself, of the hyper-invisible but still discernible. The parts of its complete identity come with that individual identity of value / value progression we are shown what's generating. Shown that it is not us, it is not the other species bodies that are generating why and how. Individual species bodies of individual bodies are manifest. No different species, but nature itself teaches us about difference, etc. But we have had. In other words, it's not even debatable legitimately if someone wants to debate that and how Native Americans' difference is used to hyper-criminally foreign influence. And there are self-body roles criminally foreign influence, forcing that to be blamed for it. In other words, as the natures of patriotism that speak, even including the Native Americans, because they had other communicated for our founders, which were Native Americans, but we only know the name of James Madison as one of our founders, and see president / chief, not just as cipher to be deciphered, but as deciphered. See, but we have what they had to classify for themselves, and we have why and how they had to have it to classify it for themselves. We have as evidence generating other evidences. See, we have revelation. We have our systems, tactile terrier, the humanity voicings. Otherwise, they sense us trying to speak for the human culture properly, and they adapt. They change and bake. They go back and forth with all sides of evidences on cases. They have all kinds of digital crime predicate acts methods and wire crime acts and methods and middle crime acts and methods. They're only capable of self-valuing roles with interbranch families too, because it uses identity speaking for the integrity of each style's needs, natures, of logic, fact, truth, nature, quality, aspects, and nature itself. Each age has other communicated for what communicates properly, for what is smart or wisdom. Then they need to pretend other, they need to self-value. Collusion slash S with overt criminal enterprises and private ones from off all campuses and all locations slash S. Collusion slash S with the breaching methods use of location slash S everywhere the species body has an individual body. Before modern religious messages were even born, it is most probable, is more probable, and is demonstrable that a breaching method forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded the people that at locations, areas, and states that could only operate the phenomenon of the names of the human species body of individual bodies as the country's names, as the grouped names, no. Forced to be also individual voices. Because it has a need for every individual hyper additionally. It has a need for every, as an individual, distinctly as a group. In other words, that's why there are completely different individual species bodies of individual bodies. It's why and how we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time, while we are a different species body. Nature itself is projecting to us about difference, is projecting slash hyper projecting to us about difference. Black people's beard. We have our founders' words replaced. Oh, please. General Keene, get the Wethersfield Police on paper, one name and sequence, and get me off the fake conversation ever with one of the Mendez brother, the older Mendez police brother. His younger brother is also involved with the hallway of the Britain Superior Court and with the campuses with some sexual medical offenders of kids. Also entered with the Britain Superior Court and with the Wethersfield Police Department with his older brother collusions. Also with people with the name is Bob Chase and Phil Collo per Bob Chase. Further with a principal being, upskirt nature involved with the worst natures of organized crimes with the kids, then upskirt nature pictures, and worst digital crimes. They have an officer Poison, also involved with waiting forensics, and the Britain Superior Court, and Harper Courts in their intimate ties, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, and digital crime acts and methods. These are increasingly people with the FBI Director Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members, intercities, next to campuses, planting evidences, and bringing courts are incapable. They already have to hide their collusions. They never had the integrity. They were child abused, only capable of pretending other. As roles with predicate acts with facts method slash S, as roles, needs, and natures they can't afford to have properly. Use of location slash S discerned. They can't afford to have discerned properly what our founders communicated about black people's whites of eyes, let alone our founders and nature itself simultaneously, slash hyper simultaneously. So why and how there is not peace? It's because there all have only been entertained criminal insidious natures of peace. So if things could change now, nature's going to be showing us, everyone, A through Z, that we are individually grouped, all group differences, and all humanity voices there are bridged. And if they pretend other, it will show us that too. That's why and how they switch and forge names into branch. They prevent paper so they can hide what they've been using the databases for. The Britain Superior Court has personally and professionally intercities, collusion slash S, planting fake transcripts and ties to kids into databases, and with the news, even next to the campuses. Increasingly, these are people with the names, with people from Russia, people from Ukraine, have collusion slash S with names and next to each of the campuses I went. And the differences of their guilt with the names with the predicate acts at the campuses relative, or the predicate acts and predicate acts methods next to it. Increasingly, the Britain Superior Court has collusion slash S with names at and next to all sides of Central Connecticut State University in the Britain Superior Court in the Britain, Connecticut, since I was a kid. roles affecting confessions and pretending I know the people or had or even a response to them. They time it at corners when you're going to walk by. This breaching method used already. We're with only 3 branches of government, clearer than day. How easier than cake. Easier than making cake to keep them criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, pretending they can speak for patriotism at countries A through Z. To hear Anthony, to speak for patriotism properly, you have to speak for those abridgments of the Constitution originally instilled, making everyone entertained. Definitions, styles of culture treatments, tactical ulterior from what culture is about. This hyperculture, this hyper native pure. Nature itself shows us the difference between. Nature itself shows us how and why the value of chief is incompatible with the value of president because there's a hyper-foreign breaching method that doesn't allow any individual, let alone the most powerful leader, any grouping of countries trying to counter with this cause and keeps and rolls with it. In other words, too, blaming other things, others, ourselves. Nature is demonstrations of it with negative value, nature progressions, acts, and natures that also contain demonstrations of a human fact, nature breaching method, being the sum value of the laws treatments, of positive treatments. Nature's a peace treatment, even. We have to discern the difference between peace and hyper peace, and with what we make, too long. Evolution, only criminal and insidious natures of evolution have been allowed to become manifest. In many ways, I tell best, vaccine. I teach those